And with his legal bills piling up, Donald Trump is turning to religion of sorts for some help. Though not in the traditional way, more culty, actually. In a social media post yesterday, the presumptive 2024 Republican nominee announced he is hawking his own version of the Bible. Take a look.
I'm proud to be partnering with my very good friend Lee Greenwood, who doesn't love his song, God Bless the USA, in connection with promoting the God Bless the USA Bible. This Bible is the King James Version and also includes our founding father documents, yes, the Constitution, which I'm fighting for every single day. Christians are under siege. We must protect content that is pro-God. We love God. I'm proud to endorse and encourage you to get this Bible. We must make America pray again. I think you all should get a copy of God Bless the USA Bible now and help spread our Christian values with others.
Trump's version of the good book is selling for $60 before shipping. This, of course, follows his other business ventures such as Trump Steaks, Trump Water, Trump University. Last month, he also unveiled Trump-branded sneakers going for $400 a pair. And in December, he even started selling pieces of the suit he was wearing when he got indicted last summer. The Trump Bible website states that none of the profits will go toward his 2024 campaign. There is no mention, however, about whether the money might go toward his legal fees. Let's bring in MSNBC contributor and author of the book, How the Right Lost Its Mind, Charlie Sykes. He has a new piece for MSNBC.com entitled Republicans Are Not As United Behind Trump as They Appear. I definitely want to hear about that, but I first want to get you and Sam in on this. This Bible seems to me to be a new level of culty. It also, if you listen to his comments, it's painful, but I did. He blames America for everything he's done to it, which is especially culty. What can be said, Charlie, to a person who hears that, gets out their credit card, and purchases a God Bless the USA Bible?
Well, the first thing you'd say is, oh, my God. I mean, it is not only culty, it is grifty. It is so much on brand for Donald Trump. I mean, obviously, he's playing on the themes of, that I am the defender of Christianity, encouraging the Christian nationalists out there. But I think the thing that you can't take your eyes off of is that he's commodifying the Bible during Holy Week, that he's selling it for $60. And this money might go to pay some of the legal fees for his relationship with a porn star that he paid off. Let us pray here. I mean, the cynicism here is not a new story, but can I just remind people that Donald Trump has been asked in the past, what is your favorite verse of the Bible? And he has no idea. He talks about 2 Corinthians. He's been asked by faith leaders, do you ever ask for forgiveness? Do you ever pray? And not really. And yet, conservative evangelical Christians have swallowed this, and so I don't expect that they're not going to swallow, that they're going to draw the line when it comes to this. But this is so much Donald Trump. I mean, it is such an artifact of this political moment where this Elmer Gantry grifter who sells the golden tennis shoes is now selling the Bible to Christians at this particular moment. And you cannot make it up. And this is Earth 2.0.
And Sam, Charlie makes the important point here that while he's on trial for paying off a porn star for an affair he had while his wife was home with their newborn child, he's asking his supporters to buy his version of the Bible for $60, undoubtedly going to pay legal fees for that same case and many others. The idea that Donald Trump espouses, quote, Christian values, as he said in that ad, is ludicrous on its face, but people are going to buy the thing. We know that.
It is quite the contrast, right? The gag order filed by the Bible video. You know, this has been something that's been evident with Trump for a while now. There was sort of an infamous poll in the 2016 race where white evangelical voters were asked about their support for Trump both before and then after the revelation of the Stormy Daniels allegations, and their support went up, which was the shocking thing. I suppose it says more about the voters than Trump. Obviously, this is part, as Charlie said, of what Trump does. He sold everything from steaks to Bibles to water to shoes. And this is just his brand, and people buy into it literally. I think the other element of the story that probably should be noted is that it does raise kind of important questions about our campaign finance system. Not the stakes in the Bible so much as he's going public. His company, Truth Social, is going public right now on the stock exchange, and it has raised a huge amount of money in valuation. That money will be used likely by Trump to pay off not just his legal bills, but potentially he could use that money to help his own campaign efforts. And that really does raise questions about the porous holes that we have in our campaign finance system and how easy it is, frankly, for not the people who buy Bibles, but the people who want to influence Trump with huge checks to get around our laws and get money to a candidate.
And Charlie, Trump is also clearly showing some anxiety about the state of this campaign. He was on Truth Social early this morning. I note 1:52 a.m. a post from Donald Trump attacking Robert F. Kennedy Jr., suggesting that he's very liberal and clearly concerned that RFK Jr. may draw some support from Trump himself. He also, as you write in your new piece for MSNBC, has made little to no effort to actually unify the Republican Party. He was rebuked by his former vice president, Mike Pence. And we recall that when Nikki Haley dropped out of the race earlier this month, she implored him, make the party a bigger tent. Try to court my supporters, even suggesting she herself might come along. But he has made zero effort to do so.
No, and I don't think that he necessarily will, given his demeanor. And, the caveat here is, of course, we've all seen the polls. We know how the Republican grassroots is rallying around Donald Trump, that he has complete control over the party and the RNC. But I do think it is notable when you look at the number of United States senators now who are saying that they're not going to vote for Donald Trump. You have Lisa Murkowski being the latest. You have Todd Young, Bill Cassidy. Mike Rounds declined to say that he was going to vote for him. I mean, you add in Mitt Romney. And one of the questions I think people, should ponder for a moment. I mean, imagine if this was the Democratic Party, if this many members of the U.S. Senate were saying, yeah, well, we're not going to support Joe Biden's bid for re-election. But the larger frame, though, is you look at the fact that I don't know in American history when this many leading members of the party, including his former vice president, including his former chiefs of staff, have come out publicly and said, we worked with him, we've seen him up close, and we're not supporting him again. As far as I can tell, the only living Republican nominee for president or vice president in this century that is supporting Donald Trump is Sarah Palin. Everybody else is out, whether you're talking about Dick Cheney, whether you're talking about George Bush, whether you're talking about Mitt Romney or Paul Ryan. None of them have lined up. I don't think there's any parallel in American history. So while on one level, Donald Trump has complete control of the Republican Party, there are these cracks, and the Biden campaign is beginning to exploit this.
All right, Charlie Sykes, thank you so much for coming on this morning. And joining us now, Democratic Senator Amy Klobuchar of Minnesota. It's really good to have you on the show. I want to talk to you about the specific case around mifepristone, but I have to ask you, due to the overturning of Roe is why we're here today. And we know that abortion health care, as I call it, is not based on religion or the history of Christianity. It's not. It's not where America is on this. And I think increasingly Americans are seeing in vivid detail why this health care is needed as women are bleeding out, becoming sterilized, becoming traumatized, having their lives threatened because they can't get the abortion health care they need. Which brings me back to the cult leader hawking his Bible, the guy who did all this, and will tell you he himself overturned Roe by bringing Leonard Leo and others into the fray to create a Supreme Court that was able to do that. It's easy to call the Bible grifty that he's selling online and to make fun of it because he usually holds Bibles upside down and things like that. But, Senator, what can be said to the person who is all in on this and who will pick up a credit card and buy this Bible? Because I actually think the abortion argument and everything that's happening to this country, it's summed up in his presentation and his selling of the Bible, but I think it's lost on the folks who want to buy it. Are they lost? Unreachable.
So, okay, I'm going to separate the issue of where people are on abortion, their own personal views, from him hawking Bibles. I just keep going back to the 10 Commandments and, you know, those commandments about keeping the Sabbath holy as we approach the Easter weekend, the commandments about not using the Lord's name in vain. And here you have someone who is literally taking a holy book and selling it and putting it out there in order to make money for his campaign. Can he legally do it? I assume that he can. But usually candidates are selling things like T-shirts, or in the case of my presidential campaign, we had Amy earrings. Okay, these are things to allow supporters to have some fun and show they support the candidate. He's going this way, and I think the way that he has degraded people with disabilities, I still will never forget when John McCain was on his deathbed, the fact that he went after John McCain, a hero to this country. These things are not consistent with the teachings of the Bible. So he can be out there hawking it all he wants. But to me, it's just one more moment of hypocrisy. And I hope people step back and look at some of the things he said and done in his life, many of which are wielding through these legal proceedings all over the country, including asking a Republican Secretary of State to find him more votes after an election. And look at that and look at what the teachings of the Bible are and make a decision about who they're going to support or not. As many moderate Republicans, as you just was pointed out on the show, like Lisa Murkowski and people like Mitt Romney, are coming to a different conclusion about who they're going to support for president.
Senator, good morning. It's good to have you with us. I want to bring you back to the Supreme Court oral arguments we heard yesterday about mifepristone. As Danny just laid out well for us, the justices appeared very skeptical of the plaintiff's argument standing, and then the merits of it as well. But larger point, let's just say for argument's sake that they don't find for the plaintiffs in this and they don't take up the case. Is this case, like the Alabama IVF ruling, the Supreme Court down at the state level, do you believe all of this is the product of what we saw almost 2 years ago in Dobbs, which is to say there were people after Dobbs who said, don't be alarmist about this, mostly conservatives saying, don't be alarmist, this is about abortion, it's not going to be about IVF, it's not going to be about mifepristone, it won't be about birth control, and yet here we are.
Exactly. And number one, legal analysis correct. They were deeply skeptical. My guess is they're going to throw this out based on standing when you have people like Gorsuch saying things like, this is a small lawsuit with big implications. Elena Kagan said it best when she said, who's the person? Where's the harm? But let's put that aside. These are the Trump-appointed justices, a number of them, that were the ones that got us into this mess in the first place by overturning Roe v. Wade. And this is a natural outcome. They said they wanted to give it back to the states. Well, guess what? It's coming right back to this court. And now you have a situation where challenges are being made to the FDA's authority, which, if they went that way, would not only mean about mifepristone, an abortion drug used by over 60% of women seeking abortions, but would also apply to things like birth control. If you can just have a group of random doctors come in and say, hey, this is not inconsistent with our beliefs to that, or HIV drugs or other things, or IVF, if you point out, then you have chaos. You don't have expert decisions being made to protect the safety of people. You're not allowing these decisions to be made between a woman and her doctor. This is the natural outcome of these Trump-appointed justices. And clearly the public is not with these extremists. 70, 80% of them, depending on the poll. In states like Ohio, in Wisconsin, when there have been ballot measures or elections relevant to this, they have sided with a woman's right to make her own decisions about her health care, not politicians.
Senator Sam Stein here. To your point, last night there was what would have been a relatively obscure state house election in Alabama, where the candidate ran well ahead of margins in the last election, the Democratic candidate, largely on a platform of protecting IVF and abortion rights and her own personal story. I'm wondering, based on that and what is now a fairly lengthy record of special election results in which Democrats have outperformed expectations in the post-Dobbs era, one, do you feel confident that this issue still has resonance and will still have resonance up and through November? And two, are there plans in place for the party to capitalize a bit more aggressively on the issue? And by that I mean, you mentioned ballot initiatives, but also maybe perhaps congressional votes or hearings or things that could put this issue more front and center for voters in the lead up to the vote.
I don't know that the word is capitalized because the voters are bringing it to us. When you go way back, I was thinking of Mika's comments about the horrific nature of this when that girl, victim of incest, young girl, age 10, ends up getting pregnant and then has to go to another state to get her health care. People are outraged by these stories. And they've been starting to go on all over the country. I know because Minnesota's in the middle of a number of states that don't allow for access. Clinics have had to move to our state. So this is happening on its own without anyone capitalizing on it. I will say the Alabama outcome in that state legislative race gives support for why the president, vice president, heading down to the South on various issues, everything from work done on the economy and the like. But a lot of this is because people value their freedoms in the South, in the Midwest, anywhere in the country. Race after race after race, from the prairies in Kansas to what we just saw in that ballot measure in Ohio with an 11-vote margin, have shown that whether people are Democrats, moderate Republicans, or independents, they are siding with the Democratic Party and Joe Biden's support for freedom. They do not want to go back to the chaos. They don't want to go back 50 years ago. They don't want to go back to the 1950s. And they don't want to go back to the 1850s, which is exactly what this Republican Party is arguing that they do with the Comstock Law.
Senator Amy Klobuchar of Minnesota, we always appreciate your time. Thanks for being here this morning.
It was fun. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks, Senator.
We're incredibly grateful for the brave rescuers who immediately rushed to the scene, and to the people of Baltimore who want to say, we're with you. We're going to stay with you as long as it takes. Around 850,000 vehicles go through that port every single year, and we're going to get it up and running again as soon as possible. 15,000 jobs depend on that port, and we're going to do everything we can to protect those jobs and help those workers.
President Biden at the White House yesterday on the federal government's response to the bridge collapse in Baltimore. And joining us now, U.S. Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg. Mr. Secretary, thanks for your time this morning. Obviously, this first and foremost is a human tragedy. There are 6 people whose families are mourning them today. From your point of view, though, also a transportation, a logistical, and infrastructure disaster. How do you begin to get your arms around a place that was so vital to commerce in this country?
Well, you're right. First and foremost, our hearts go out to all of the families of the victims, and our thanks go out to all of the first responders who unquestionably saved lives in their response to this incident. Now we have to prepare for what's next. That key bridge was a very important thoroughfare for vehicles, and because the bridge is down and the ship is still there, that channel is closed. That is the main channel, really the only channel to get to the majority of the port facilities in Baltimore. It's the top vehicle handling port in the U.S. That's not just cars, by the way. That also includes a lot of farm equipment, which is a very important export for the American economy. There's a small area that is outside of the bridge. It's called Sparrow Point. There's a facility called Trade Point there. We're already looking at how that could play a role in getting through this next period, but it is nothing like the capacity that is in the main part of the port itself. And thousands of workers, if goods aren't moving, they're not getting paid. So we're very concerned for them, and the bottom line is that we are doing everything that can be done so that we can get this bridge back up and get that port back open.
So, Mr. Secretary, on a large scale, as you say, we're talking about international trade here. Are you confident, first, that that can be rerouted, that there are enough ports on the East Coast and the Northeast to handle all of that? And then the second question is a more local one, which is we're just hearing from Antonia Hilton, our reporter in Baltimore, about everyday residents of Baltimore who aren't sure how they're going to get to work. They're not sure how they're going to get to their medical appointments and things like that. What do you say to them?
That's right. There's about 30,000 vehicles a day that normally go over that bridge. They have to be diverted and rerouted. There are alternate routes to tunnels 95 and 895 that the majority of that traffic will be routed to, but certainly going to add to commute times and complicate a lot of people's routines and lives until that bridge is back in service. On the supply chain front, there are certainly many ports on the East Coast. There is no substitute for the Port of Baltimore being up and running. Right now, what we're doing is working with our newly created multimodal freight office. This is something that was actually part of President Biden's infrastructure package and has been stood up just since those supply chain issues that we encountered on the West Coast back in 2021 because of COVID, and will play a key role along with our maritime administration and others, in helping to make sure that we can smooth out those supply chains. This is not like aviation. So if a runway goes out of service and planes have to be diverted, there is, of course, a centralized air traffic control that tells those airplanes what to do and where to go. It doesn't work that way with ocean shipping. The different shippers, the different ports, the different cargo owners, they're all connected informally, but they all make independent decisions. So we're using our convening ability as a Department of Transportation to make sure that more of these parties are talking to each other. And I think that work that's built up over recent years is going to serve us well as we navigate these challenges right now.
All right, we'll let you get back to work. We appreciate you stopping through. U.S. Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg. Mr. Secretary, thanks for your time this morning. And joining us now from Baltimore, Maryland's Democratic Governor Wes Moore. Governor Moore, good morning. Good to have you with us this morning. We're so sorry for what's happened in your state, to your city as well. Our hearts go out to those people, as we said, the families of the 6 construction workers who were up on that bridge. Can you speak a little bit about the phone call you got in the middle of the night last night and what happened from there?
Yeah, I've come to learn in this role that when my phone rings in the middle of the night, it's never good news. And I remember when the phone rang, and it was the mayor of Baltimore, and then soon after my chief of staff, and they said the key bridge is gone. And I said, what do you mean gone? And they said it's collapsed. This is something that is iconic for all of us in Baltimore and all of us in the state of Maryland. This bridge has been here as long as I've been alive. And we're talking about something that over 35,000 people transport this bridge every single day. And so the economic impact is massive, but also just the human impact of that catastrophe that took place is truly devastating for us here.
Governor Moore, good morning. Jonathan Lemire. We are learning, though, about the quick thinking and heroism of some of those involved last night, that the crew was able to mayday from the ship, that they were out of power, which allowed workers on the bridge to stop traffic, potentially saving dozens of lives there. Tell us more about what you've learned about those moments right before and after impact.
Yeah, the thing that we know so far is that when they called in for Mayday, explaining that the power had gone out and they had lost the ability to steer the ship, that was able to notify these heroic first responders who immediately sprung into action. And they were able to get on the bridge, to start notifying the people who were on the bridge that they needed to get off the bridge, and then also begin to stop that flow of traffic that was taking place. The fact that they were able to stop cars from coming onto the bridge, that saved countless lives, because had more cars been on that bridge when it collapsed, this would have turned a catastrophic incident into an even more catastrophic incident. So the debt of gratitude that we all have towards these first responders, it's incalculable.
Governor, where does the investigation stand, and has foul play been completely ruled out?
Yeah, so we're in the process of a thorough investigation to identify exactly what happened, what led to the power failure, and what led to the inability for that ship to be able to change azimuth. And when we're talking about a ship of that size moving at that clip, there's not much infrastructure that can take on that brunt level of force. So we have to be able to look into it. And all indications as of right now are showing that this was not terrorism nor any form of nefarious intent. The thing we do know is that, what we're doing right now on the ground is, we're just marshaling all the resources, all the state resources, all the federal resources, and just being able to really lead this charge to focus on a healing and a rebuilding of what is going to be a very long process for us.
Governor, as you laid out a minute ago, this is, for people who don't know the area, this is the main artery. This is not just for Baltimore, not just for the state of Maryland, but up and down the East Coast. It's so critical. So I put the same question to you I just put to Secretary Buttigieg. Is what are you saying to Marylanders this morning about getting to work, about getting to their medical appointments? I mean, this is a huge blow, obviously, to so many people.
It is, and what we're saying to people is that that we are coordinating these efforts to create alternative routes for people to be able to move forward, for people to be able to get to school and get to work, and to maintain a certain level of normalcy. But we're also letting people know that this is going to be long. And we're going to need to be, as we say, Maryland tough and Baltimore strong in this moment. But the economic impact of the Port of Baltimore is tremendous, and not just to the state of Maryland. It's tremendous to the entire country. We're talking over 51 million tons of foreign cargo, the largest in the country. We're talking about the largest port for vehicles, for heavy trucks, for agricultural equipment. So this is not just going to impact Maryland. This is impacting farmers in Kentucky. It's impacting auto dealers in Michigan. This is impacting the entire country. And so we have to be able to move with speed. We have to be able to move with urgency. And it's the reason that we're going to coordinate all of these efforts to make sure that we can get to a sense of completion, and we've got to do it quickly.
All right, Maryland Governor Wes Moore, thank you very much for coming on the show this morning. We'll be checking back in for sure. Joining us now is Democratic Governor Roy Cooper of North Carolina. Governor, thank you so much for being on this morning. So Biden is behind Trump in some polls at this point. Can he flip the Tar Heel state blue? What's it going to take?
Well, yesterday we saw how public policy plays a role in how people vote, because health care is an issue which shows the best of Joe Biden and the worst of Donald Trump. They came to talk about health care access, and every single North Carolinian cares about that. We already have 1 million people on the marketplace for the Affordable Care Act, and we just, in a very difficult, bipartisan, hardworking way, were able to expand Medicaid, and we're signing up 1,000 people a day. I think one of my best days as governor was being able to hand Penny a new health care card. She had battled cancer. She was a working person, but had fallen in the gap. And because of Medicaid expansion, she was able to finally get health insurance, along with hundreds of thousands of other people. And to put that in place, Joe Biden, as vice president, had to get this Affordable Care Act in place. We're celebrating the 14th anniversary of that. And we had to work hard getting Republican sheriffs, Republican rural county commissioners, chambers of commerce to force the Republican legislature to expand Medicaid. It was a coalition of people. Now Donald Trump wants to come and snatch that health care card away from Penny. Mark Robinson, who's running for governor against our Democratic nominee, our Attorney General Josh Stein, wants to do the same thing. People aren't going to stand for that in North Carolina. And if we can continue to talk about these issues, this contrast in health care, in women's reproductive health, and going back to the cultural wars, which North Carolina doesn't want to do. Remember that battlefield of the bathroom bill that not only was wrong in and of itself, but turned businesses away from North Carolina? Now we are the #1 state for business 2 years in a row. Why do we want to go back to those kinds of policies in North Carolina? And I believe at the end of the day, we can turn North Carolina blue, elect Josh Stein as governor, and we can win this state for Joe Biden.
So, Governor, I think the winning issues are there for sure. But I want to ask you a question I've asked a few others on the show this morning. How do Democrats in North Carolina cope with that contrast, with the alternative, Donald Trump, who is compelling to a lot of North Carolina voters, who is selling Bibles, his own God Bless America or USA Holy Bible during a religious holiday, and using religion now in a distorted way, if I may, to make money that probably will be used for his legal bills in a hush money case, which involves having sex with a porn star and paying her off to keep her mouth shut. I know it's explicit, it's difficult, but how do you cope with the reality of this alternative who is compelling, who really sweeps a lot of voters up into excitement to vote for him?
It's hard to comprehend, but it's there and it's real. And we know that all too well in North Carolina because Donald Trump has won our state 2 times. I think people have struggled to get their head around the fact that this is actually going to be a rematch of the 2020 election. And I think everyday working people who are worried about feeding their family and getting health care and looking after their parents or grandparents, making sure their kids get a good education, they really aren't thinking about politics. And I think polls reflect that, no, this really can't be a rematch. The fact is, it is going to be a choice between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. We believe that we can get people when they know that women's reproductive freedom is on the line, and the majority of North Carolinians support women's reproductive freedom, when they know that health care is on the line, and clearly Donald Trump has said that he wants to do away the repeal and replace thing. He said the repeal a lot, but there's really no replace. We understand that that's not going to happen. We believe that we can increase the turnout of Democrats in all areas of our state, and particularly in counties like Mecklenburg, Charlotte, which has more registered Democrats than any other county. Their turnout has been pretty low. When we can get people fired up and understanding what's at stake here, our democracy is indeed on the ballot. And when we pull them all together, we believe that we can push this thing over the top. It was very close last time. In 2016, Trump beat Hillary Clinton by 3.6%. He only beat Joe Biden by 1.3%. Our blue counties and cities are getting bluer. We're the 3rd fastest growing state in the country. A lot of the people coming into North Carolina are college educated. The demographics are trending our way. I think it's important for this country that North Carolina do well, because the road to the White House might very well go through North Carolina. We're fighting hard here. We know what's on the line.
So, Governor, those numbers you all just laid out are all accurate, and Barack Obama is the only Democrat to win a presidential election in North Carolina in the last 50 years, almost, since Jimmy Carter. So I would ask you, as someone in 2016, when Donald Trump exploded onto the scene, you won your first term as governor, despite the power of Donald Trump in the state of Virginia. You won narrowly, I think you would concede, but you won in 2020. You're reelected more comfortably. What is your advice, then, to the man you'd like to see succeed you in that position, Josh Stein, the Attorney General, but also to President Biden, about what you need to do as a Democrat to win a state like North Carolina?
Well, who they are fits the bill. Josh Stein was the head of my consumer protection division when I was Attorney General. I've known him 2 decades. He has determination and grit. We know what Joe Biden has been able to do for decades in negotiating bipartisan legislation that has affected the everyday lives of Americans. I think it's important. People respect elected leaders who listen to them and who act on what they have heard. That's what we have done in North Carolina. I've been able to do that. The political bubble said that you couldn't pass Medicaid expansion with the Republican legislature because the Republican leaders told them so. Yet we went to these rural Republican counties and asked them, and they talked about hospitals closing and how hard it was on law enforcement and how hard it was on small businesses to provide health insurance for their employees. And we were able to organize them to lobby their own legislators until it was overwhelming, and Republicans finally voted for Medicaid expansion. People respect hard work. I think people respect action that affects them positively. Both Josh Stein and Joe Biden have amazing stories to tell. So we're going to be telling those stories as well as warning the people what can happen. We saw Donald Trump's first presidency. I don't think we ain't seen nothing yet if he gets elected president again.
For sure. Democratic Governor Roy Cooper of North Carolina, thank you very much for coming on the show this morning.
Now is the mayor of Baltimore, Brandon Scott. Mayor Scott, please accept our sympathies for what's been happening over these last 36 hours in your city. Can you take us through a little bit your day yesterday? We talked to Governor Moore in our last hour. He talked about getting the phone call that no governor, no mayor wants to get. What has been the impact on your city?
Well, listen, we know this is a devastating tragedy, and yesterday I hadn't been to sleep yet. I have a 3-month-old baby boy, and I got a phone call from my fire chief who told me that the Key Bridge had collapsed. And I said, repeat that? And he said that, sir, the Key Bridge collapsed. A ship ran into it. So I talked to him, immediately got off the phone with him, called Governor Moore and his team, and then just went straight to the scene. And then we know going from there throughout the rest of the day yesterday, this is an unthinkable tragedy. And when you think about those families, when you think about those workers who were simply trying to improve transit for the rest of us, losing your life in this way is nothing short of a tragedy, and we have to continue to uplift their families and pray for them and let them know that we'll be here from them long after everyone else is gone as we help them heal throughout this process for the rest of their lives.
Yeah, filling potholes in the middle of the night to improve that bridge. Mr. Mayor, can you speak for those people watching who don't live around Baltimore, don't know the Northeast corridor, the Mid-Atlantic as well, how critical that Key Bridge is to your city, your state, and really to the country?
Yeah, listen, the Key Bridge is a critical thing. It allows the ships to go into our port, which is the 9th largest in the country, #1 for auto exports and import. It also has a Domino Sugar Refinery, the largest in the Western Hemisphere. All of these things are going to tremendously impact not just Baltimore and Maryland, but the entire supply chain. We know we have to figure out, working with our federal partners, our state partners, everyone is locked in together on how we're going to work through every process. Right now, of course, it's focused on recovering those who we lost so that we can have some sense of closure for those families. And then we will be talking about rebuilding, removing the damage, the wreckage, reopening the channel, talking about how to rebuild the bridge. And we will do that because Baltimore is always going to come back stronger. We've heard it from President Biden himself. We will all see this through, but this is going to be a long-term issue, and we will never forget what happened.
Mr. Mayor, I'm sure it's comforting to hear, especially from you, from leaders like you, that there will be support to help these families who lost someone in these bridge collapse heal long after this moment. I'm curious what is being done to support them financially or in a community way.
Well, everything is on the table, right? We know that obviously in this moment it's about making sure they're getting the trauma and grief services that they need as we work through what happens with recoveries. It's about funeral and other financial things that we often do in situations like this, and we're going to continue to do whatever we need to do. But it's also going to be about what happens long after all of that, and when folks are going to still need that trauma and mental health services. They may just need someone to call. Unfortunately, as mayor, I've been through tragedies, none like this, but those folks often have to come back to you long after the incident itself is over, because this is something that they're going to be trying to heal and come back from for the rest of their lives. This is not something that's ever going to go away, and it's never going to go away from them. As long as there's breath in my body and I'm in city government, we're never going to go away.
Mr. Mayor, of course, the loss of human life, the most important story right now, but there are ramifications for your city in terms of traffic, in terms of commuting, in terms of people getting to their jobs, to their doctor's appointments, whatever it might be. Is there any early advice you can provide to people as to how you're going to be able to navigate that, and any even initial estimate as to how long it will take for a replacement bridge to be built?
No, we'll be working with federal transportation, Maryland transportation on that, obviously, and we'll get to that. And as far as the traffic goes, we've already worked with MDOT, who is the lead, because this is a Maryland road, and they'll be directing folks around. We have 895 and 95 tunnels, right? The Key Bridge was built to alleviate traffic from the tunnel. So we're going to have folks, there's going to be traffic. We're going to have to allow ourselves more time. We're going to have to allow ourselves that time and more patience with everyone, because when we just went through something like this, we all know that it's going to have a big traffic impacts, but we have to have that patience, because nothing is going to change that right now. And we have to continue to come together as a city in every way, including being mindful of how we're traveling and when we're traveling, so that we can alleviate anything that we possibly can.
Mr. Mayor, it's such an important reminder of the degree to which the American economy runs on immigrant labor. And these people who came to the United States, of course, not expecting anything like this to happen. And we really do rely on their efforts to keep the economy going. Remind our viewers how central this bridge and your port is to the economy of the eastern seaboard of the United States.
Well, listen, I just said it very clearly. We're the #1 for cars, and we know how important cars and car imports and exports are to this country, right? And when you think about that, when you think about the other companies that will be impacted, from Amazon, Under Armour, Domino Sugar, Carnival cruise ships that come out of the harbor port, this is going to be a big impact, and we're going to have to work through with our partners to make sure that we get this open as quickly but as safely and responsibly as possible. And we know that we have the full weight of federal government that's going to be here with us, the full weight of state government, obviously under Governor Moore's leadership, the full weight of city government from under my leadership, and even our County Executive Olszewski and his government, all of us together to make sure that we can do this the right way, the responsible way, and the quickest way possible.
And just finally, I know we have to go, but I appreciate the words and the support. But for those who lost their lives, especially these immigrants who are working on the bridge, will there be a fund set up or something? Because these were the people who were bringing home the salary that was helping them live here.
Listen, we will support the families of our residents every way that we can, and that includes financially. We'll be talking and discussing with those folks and with the folks that they work for how to do all that. We have to do that in decency and in order, but we'll be supporting those families in every single way, and that includes financially.
Baltimore Mayor Brandon Scott, thank you very much for coming on the show this morning. We appreciate it. Speaking of, the Biden and Trump campaigns went after one another yesterday over whether or not Trump would repeal Obamacare should he be reelected. In a post on Truth Social, if you can call it that, Trump wrote, quote, "I'm not running to terminate the ACA as crooked Joe Biden disinformates and misinformates all the time." I just want to say, if Joe Biden put out something like this, Our friends at Fox News and all the other networks would be going crazy saying he's senile, he can't even spell, he doesn't even know what he's doing. Anywho, in other words, make the ACA much, much better for far less money or cost to our gressed American citizens. MAGA 2024. In response to those comments, the Biden campaign responded by writing, quote, "A feeble and confused Trump posts a typo-riddled, all-caps rant, misspelling Biden, disinform, misinforms, and other basic words." In addition, the campaign posted a montage of Trump threatening to repeal Obamacare.
And I told the Republicans, I said, look, if you really want to do something, just let it explode. And then they'll come begging us to fix it, okay? Begging. This is a newer subject, but Obamacare is a disaster. And I said, we're going to do something about it. We're going to win by knocking the hell out of Obamacare, terminating it, coming up with something much less expensive, much better.
Katty K, does anyone believe what Donald Trump has to say?
Here we are on the 14th anniversary of Obamacare, and it's more popular than ever. And no, the Republicans have never come up with the replace part of that whole repeal and replace. And Donald Trump didn't come up with the replace part of it when he was president. So it seems unlikely that there's anything going to happen to Obamacare. I mean, I think it gets to, John Heilemann, it gets to something, the tone of the way the Biden campaign is now hitting back hard at things like this Truth Social post and all its wonderful malapropisms and misspellings. How do they handle Trump online? Do they go for kind of making fun of him, taking on Trump at his own game in the way that sort of Marco Rubio tried and dismally failed to do? Do they take the high ground? Do they just keep pointing out the policy issues like he's never going to replace Obamacare and these are all the times where he said he's going to destroy Obamacare? What's the tone they have to strike? Because Trump is such a tricky fish to deal with.
Allow me, Katty, to informate you on that matter, because I'm always a big fan. Trump's got a whole different lexicon. I mean, I think feeble and confused it says it all in the tone of that Biden, I'm still stuck on the Bible, on the tone of the Bible response. They're just they're trying to run straight at Trump with the kinds of insults that Trump throws at Biden. And I think that's the right sort of spirit to it. I don't think that anybody over there, just to be clear, in the Marco Rubio, whenever anybody mentions Marco Rubio taking on Trump, I'm always thinking about maybe Rubio went a little bit far when he started getting into a debate over Trump, literally on national television, over their respective, the sizes of their respective genitalia. So I wouldn't suggest that Biden will go that far, but I think that they are in that mode now where they think that they can go toe to toe with Biden or go toe to toe with Trump with that kind of spirit of the gloves are off. Let's put it that way. I think that's kind of where we have been with. The Biden campaign has been doing a good job online with Trump for the past year or so, but they really have amped up their game since the Republican primary started, and in particular after the State of the Union. And I don't think that they are going to be relentless. I don't think that they can give any inch or any quarter to Trump and to let anything go by that's as ridiculous as this thing that Trump just put up. It's not just that Trump says he wants to repeal Obamacare. It was the first thing he did as president in 2017. He walked into office. First thing he did was try to repeal Obamacare. As you pointed out, Katty, there was no replacement. That effort failed. I agree with you. I don't think Obamacare is going anywhere. And you'll note, even in Trump's own words on the Truth Social post, he doesn't say, I'm not going to repeal Obamacare. He says, I'm not running to repeal Obamacare, which is that is not a misprecision on Trump's part. That's Trump not saying, well, I'm running for a lot of other reasons, but I'm not even going to deny that I would, in fact, repeal Obamacare or try to if I became president. And I think to the extent the Biden campaign has that spirit that they have and know that they have a winning issue here and in many other cases, that's the way that they're going to go after Trump, combining the kind of spirit of the fight with policy positions that are way more popular with the American people.
So, David French, in recent weeks, national polls show that Joe Biden has inched ahead battleground state polls very close, pretty much across the board. And that's in part because Donald Trump seems to be leaving some Republican votes on the board. Let's remember Nikki Haley, in her concession speech when she bowed out of the race, implored Trump, make this a bigger tent, make a pitch for my supporters, even suggesting that she herself could come aboard. She didn't say that. But at the very least, she was saying, there are Republicans who want to be with you. Convince us. He's taken no steps to do that. Do you think those Republicans will come back to him anyway? Or do you think they'll stay home or even go to Joe Biden?
Well, a certain percentage are going to peel off. This just keeps happening. He keeps alienating people. And there's a certain percentage of Reagan conservatives in particular who now have been spending 8 years still hanging on to the GOP while the GOP has been saying, we hate you, you're terrible, you're horrible. And oh, by the way, vote for us or you're a traitor. And that's been the message for years now. And it's slowly but surely alienating people. We saw it in 2020. People who left that top line blank or voted for Biden instead of Trump, who voted Republican downline. Those folks cost Trump some states. And so he's making no move, none at all, as you were saying, to reach out to them. He's genuinely, it appears to be, just hoping that he's going to either attract enough new people or the old patterns of bullying Republicans on the line will continue to work. And look, let's not be too idealistic or naive here. The bullying will work for a lot of people. It may work for most people, but they're continuing to just push away winnable voters because, frankly, they hate those voters. They really do hate those voters, and so they're pushing people away.
New York Times opinion columnist David French, thank you very much for being on this morning. John Hallman, stay with us if you can, please. And coming up, welcome back. Alabama is the latest state to pass a bill restricting diversity, equity, and inclusion programs in public schools, colleges, and state agencies. The bill, signed into law by Governor Kay Ivey last week, joins a growing number of states that are restricting DEI practices. For more on this and the impact, let's bring in Morning Joe reporter Daniela Pierre Bravo. Daniela, tell us what you found in terms of what this will mean for college campuses in Alabama.
Good morning, Mika. For some college students in Alabama, DEI programs have made all the difference in their ability to thrive, from scholarship access to job networking to communities that provide a feeling of safety and belonging. But now, without funding, that may all disappear. I spoke to students around the state on what's at stake. Take a look.
Our Safe Zone Resource Center is our LGBT plus mental health resource center here at the university. And freshman year, I had a really traumatic experience with just like slurs being thrown at me. And I had never felt fearful for my safety, my physical safety, in this way. And the Safe Zone Resource Center, when I went to their Rainbow Connection program that would be banned under this bill, their staff helped me find my self-worth again. And I can say confidently that, like, I would not be on this call without their resources, without their support.
Our Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, I guess our advisor specifically works in that office, our advisor for our Esperanza organization. And that's really what a lot of the programs are about, helping students network and connect with the professional world, especially students who are part of communities that aren't really represented.
I'm the secretary of the Hispanic Latino Association at the University of Alabama, and we'll be directly impacted. And it's sad because I know students have chosen the University of Alabama because we were here.
These students were among the hundreds who showed up at the Montgomery State House to protest the bill and share their experiences with legislators. Even though the act passed, they say they're not giving up on this issue.
We're going to keep fighting. This is the most civic engagement I've seen in a while. We had students from the University of South Alabama. We had students from the University of West Alabama. And for legislators to run out the back door when students drove 3 hours to come have this face-to-face contact is disgusting.
Sean, you managed to get one of those legislators who were trying to run out the back door.
Well, that was the chairman for the state Republican Party that was in the hallway. And I just asked him, why is this a priority for the party? Why is this a priority for his his representatives, they are so based in conspiracy theories, and the reality of what is happening on our campuses isn't like in their brains. They have no grounding in truth.
Doing away with DEI has been a top concern for Republicans since the Supreme Court ended affirmative action. Anti-DEI legislation has been introduced by Republican lawmakers in at least 30 states since then. The Alabama Republican Party chairman is voicing support for the new law, saying it ensures responsible use of tax dollars while pushing back on what he calls the woke agenda. It will now be up to schools, Mika, in the state on how to interpret the law and to decide if they want to keep some of these organizations and fund them without state dollars. That legislation goes into effect October 1st.
Wow, great insights from those students. Daniela Pierre-Bravo, thank you very much for bringing that to us.
Hey everyone, MSNBC has a new and improved app. You'll get real-time alerts and analysis, live blogs, in-depth essays, video highlights, and the best 2024 election coverage. Download the new MSNBC app. Here's how to do it. You tap on the App Store on your phone. You hit search on the bottom right corner. You type in MSNBC. You click on the MSNBC app. You click on Get or the cloud icon and enjoy it.